10 years ago, I was 15, and my life flipped upside down overnight. My mom walked out on us without a word, without a fight, without a reason, just gone. She left me and my dad, and we never heard from her again. One day, I woke up to the sound of my dad moving around the house, louder than usual. I got out of bed, still half asleep, and found him standing in the kitchen, staring at a note she'd left on the counter. It was short, too short to make any sense of it. Something about needing space and time. That was it. No goodbyes, no warning signs. She packed up and left, and we had no clue where she went. It didn't seem real at first. I kept expecting her to come back, maybe the next day, or the next week. But days turned into weeks, and then months, and I slowly realized she wasn't coming back. Not for us, not for me. My dad didn't talk about it much, but I could tell he was hurting. He worked long hours before she left, but after it seemed like he poured everything he had into his job. I guess that's how he dealt with it. For me, life changed in ways I didn't expect. I became quieter, more focused on school, and the small group of friends I had became my safe space. I stopped thinking about her as much, stopped wondering where she went or why she left. I had to grow up faster than I wanted to. My dad tried to be both parents, he really did, but I knew it wasn't easy for him. He never badmouthed her, never told me what to think or feel about her. We just carried on. That's how we survived. Fast forward a decade, and now I'm preparing for my wedding. I'm in my mid-20s, and life has been steady. I met Anna about 5 years ago, and she's been my rock. We've built a life together, and now we're getting married. The wedding isn't huge, just close family and friends. We wanted something small and intimate, something that felt like us. Everything's been falling into place, and I'm actually excited about it. The venue's booked, the guest list is set, and my dad has been a big help with the preparations. He's as invested in this wedding as I am, and it feels like a full circle moment for us. Anna and I have a great relationship. She's understanding, patient, and we've talked about everything, my mom, my childhood, all of it. She's been with me through the ups and downs, and I couldn't ask for a better partner. As the big day gets closer, I'm focused on making sure everything goes smoothly. We've got the catering sorted, the flowers are ordered, and the suit fits perfectly. For once in my life, things are calm. Then, out of nowhere, I get an email. I don't recognize the address at first, but when I open it, my heart skips a beat. It's from my mom. I haven't heard from her in 10 years, and now, days before my wedding, she decides to reach out. She says she regrets leaving, that she's sorry for what she did, and that she wants to come to my wedding. She doesn't give much of an explanation for why she left, just some vague comments about personal reasons and needing time to figure things out. She asks if we can meet before the wedding to talk. I'm frozen for a few minutes, staring at the screen. My first instinct is to delete the email, pretend I never saw it, but I can't. I close my laptop and try to shake it off, but the words linger in my mind. Why now? Why, after all this time, does she want back in? And why does she think she can just show up like nothing happened? The timing couldn't be worse. I'm days away from one of the biggest moments of my life, and now I have to deal with this. I want to be focused on Anna, on our future together, but now I'm stuck in the past, revisiting all the pain and confusion from when she left. My dad doesn't know about the email yet, and I'm not sure how to tell him. He's been through enough, and I don't want to drag him into this mess. But I also know I can't keep it from him. He deserves to know. That night, I sit with Anna, telling her about the email. She listens quietly, her expression calm but concerned. She doesn't push me to make a decision right away, and that's one of the things I love about her. She's always been supportive, always let me process things in my own time. She says we'll figure it out, whatever I decide. But it's not that simple. My mom walked out on us without a second thought, and now she wants to be part of my wedding, part of my life again. I don't even know who she is anymore. Does she really deserve to come to the wedding after everything? What if she leaves again? What if she causes more damage? It's like a storm has rolled in just as things were finally settling down. I've got this perfect picture of my wedding day in my head, me, Anna, my dad, our friends, and now my mom is barging in, threatening to ruin it all. Part of me is angry, another part is curious, but mostly I'm just confused. I don't know what to do. The logical part of me says to shut it down, to focus on the people who've been there for me, like my dad and Anna. But another part of me wonders if this is a chance to finally get some closure. After 10 years of silence, is it worth hearing her out? Or will it just open old wounds that are better left untouched? I don't have answers yet. All I know is that everything just got a lot more complicated, and I'm running out of time to figure it out. Update 1. After staring at the email for what felt like forever, I finally opened it again. The words hadn't changed. My mom, after 10 years of silence, wanted to come to my wedding. The email started off formal, almost like it could have been written by a stranger. She apologized for her absence, using words like regret and mistake, but she didn't say why she left. The reason apparently was still personal, something she wasn't ready to share in an email. She asked if we could meet before the wedding, to talk things through in person. I read it over and over, searching for something that wasn't there. An explanation, maybe. A real apology. But no matter how many times I read it, the same hollow words stared back at me. It didn't sit right. If she really regretted leaving, why wait 10 years to say something? Why choose now, days before my wedding, to show up in my life again? I couldn't deal with this alone, so I told my dad about the email the next day. We were in the middle of finalizing the seating arrangements when I brought it up. He was quiet for a long time after I told him. I could see his jaw tightening, his hands still as he stared at the list of names in front of him. She wants to come to the wedding, I said, trying to fill the silence. She wants to meet before. He didn't look up right away. Instead, he took a deep breath and set the pen down. Then he finally met my eyes, and I could tell that this wasn't the first time he had thought about her coming back. Focus on the wedding, he told me. His voice was calm, measured, like he had been preparing for this conversation for a long time. This is your time with Anna. You don't need her showing up and making things harder. I wasn't surprised by his reaction. He'd always been cautious when it came to her, never giving much away about what happened between them. He never badmouthed her, but he also never said much to defend her. Just facts. She left. He stayed. And that was that. There was something in the way he said it, though, that made me pause. Almost like he knew more than he was letting on. I pressed him about it, but he didn't offer much. He just said that there were things from back then that didn't add up, but it wasn't the right time to talk about them. I could feel the weight of his words, like he was hinting at something bigger, something I wasn't ready to hear yet. Anna, of course, was supportive when I told her about the email. We were sitting together on the couch, and she listened without interrupting. She always did that. Let me get it all out before offering her thoughts. When I finished, she leaned back, thoughtful. You don't have to decide right away, she reminded me. We can take some time to think about it. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. I was grateful for that, for her steady presence. But even with Anna's support, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something I needed to deal with before the wedding. The idea of her being at the wedding, sitting among the guests as if she hadn't disappeared for a decade, felt wrong. But at the same time, ignoring her completely didn't feel right either. I talked to one of my closest friends about it the next day. We met up for coffee, and I laid everything out. He knew about my mom leaving but hadn't heard a word about her since. When I told him she had reached out, he raised an eyebrow. She wants to come to your wedding. After all this time, he asked, incredulous. That's a lot to take in, man. We sat in silence for a moment before he added, look, maybe it's worth hearing her out. Family stuff, especially stuff like this, doesn't just go away. Even if she doesn't come to the wedding, maybe it's better to talk to her now, before it eats away at you later. He had a point. As much as I wanted to pretend like her email didn't exist, like she didn't exist, I knew that ignoring it wasn't going to make anything better. If I didn't deal with this now, it would probably follow me hanging over the wedding, maybe even beyond that. It was unresolved, and that made everything more complicated. Later that night, I found myself sitting in front of my laptop again, staring at the email. I had gone through all the scenarios in my head. I knew that meeting her before the wedding could go one of two ways. Either it would give me the closure I needed, or it would make things worse. But I also knew that not meeting her wouldn't give me any answers. If I didn't go through with it, I'd be left wondering why she really left, and why she wanted back into my life now. So after sitting there for what felt like hours, I started typing. I kept it short. I agreed to meet her. I didn't give her any details about how I felt or what I thought. Just the basics. A time and place to meet, a neutral location, a cafe near my apartment. A week before the wedding, early afternoon. I hit send, and it was done. Now all I had to do was wait. That night, I told Anna that I had responded, that I had agreed to meet her. She nodded, understanding. There wasn't much else to say. The meeting was set, and whatever happened next was out of my hands. As the days passed, I tried to focus on the wedding preparations, but the thought of seeing her again was always there, in the back of my mind. Every time I sat down to finalize details, to talk to vendors, or even to look over the guest list, my thoughts drifted to that cafe meeting. Would she show up? Would she give me the answers I'd been waiting for all these years? Or would it be more of the same, a vague explanation, empty apologies, and more confusion? The day of the meeting was fast approaching, and with it, a storm of unresolved questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. Update 2. The day of the meeting came faster than I expected. I walked into the cafe, unsure of what to expect, but knowing I had to face whatever came next. It was a small place, one of those cozy spots with dim lighting and mismatched furniture, the kind where you could lose yourself for hours. But today it felt suffocating. I had picked a table near the window, more out of instinct than anything else, and sat down to wait. I had no idea what she looked like now. 10 years is a long time. As I scanned the faces walking past the cafe window, I wondered if I would recognize her right away, or if she would be a stranger to me now. But the moment she walked in, I knew. She hadn't changed as much as I thought she would, but there was something different about her. She looked older, more fragile. Her hair had grayed, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She seemed smaller somehow, like life had weighed her down in the years she had been gone. She spotted me immediately and hesitated at the door for a moment before making her way over. Her steps were slow, deliberate, like she was unsure whether she was welcome. The moment she sat down, the air between us felt heavy with everything unsaid. I watched her fidget with the edge of her sleeve, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to settle into the chair. I clenched my jaw, unsure of how to begin. The silence stretched out between us, both of us not quite ready to break it. She glanced at me a few times, as if searching for the right words, but nothing came. I stared down at the table, my fingers tracing patterns in the wood grain, waiting for her to start. Finally, she spoke. She didn't jump right into an apology or an explanation. Instead, she started talking about how hard things had been back then, about how she had felt trapped by the pressure of family life. She mentioned a relationship crisis, but it was vague. There was no mention of specifics, just words that danced around the edges of whatever had really happened. She talked about feeling like she couldn't breathe, about needing to escape, and how she had made the choice to leave because she couldn't handle it anymore. She said she had broken down, that she regretted not seeking help sooner. I could see the guilt in her eyes as she spoke, but something about it felt off. The way she was telling the story, it wasn't quite adding up. I listened, but my mind kept drifting back to all the unanswered questions, the holes in her story. There was something she wasn't telling me, something important. I tried to focus on what she was saying, but every word felt incomplete, like she was only giving me part of the truth. As she talked, I noticed the little things, the way she kept looking down, avoiding eye contact for too long, her fingers twisting together like she was trying to hold herself together. It was clear she was nervous, but it didn't feel like the kind of nervousness that comes from guilt. It was more like she was afraid of something else, something bigger than what she was saying. I didn't press her on it though. I just let her talk, hoping she would give me more. But the explanation stayed vague, incomplete. I didn't feel the emotional connection I thought I would. There was no sense of relief, no sudden wave of understanding. If anything, I felt more distant than ever. The woman sitting in front of me didn't feel like the mother I had known before she left. She felt like someone else, someone I didn't know anymore. When she finished speaking, she asked me if she could come to the wedding. The question hung in the air between us, and I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to say no, to shut her out like she had done to us all those years ago. But another part of me couldn't make the decision right then and there. I told her I needed time to think about it, and she nodded, her expression falling just a little, like she had been hoping for a different answer. We sat in silence for a few more minutes before I finally stood up to leave. She didn't say anything as I pushed back my chair, and I didn't offer any more words either. There was nothing left to say, not right then. The meeting had left me with more questions than answers, and I wasn't sure if I would ever really get the closure I was looking for. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt the tension in my chest easing slightly. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but at least I had taken the first step. I had met her. I had heard her side of the story, even if it didn't make much sense. Now, I had to figure out what came next. Just as I stepped outside, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from Anna or maybe a friend checking in. But when I looked down, I saw it was from my dad. The message was short, just a few words, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. "We need to talk about your mother. It's urgent." I stopped in my tracks, staring at the screen. My heart raced as I read the words again, trying to make sense of what he could possibly mean. We had already talked about her once, and I had assumed that was the end of it. But this message, it felt different. It felt like there was something he hadn't told me. Something important. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I slipped the phone back into my pocket and started walking, my mind racing with possibilities. What could he have to say that was so urgent? Why hadn't he mentioned it before? As I made my way home, the weight of everything pressed down on me. The meeting with my mom, the questions I still had, and now this message from my dad. It felt like everything was building to something bigger, something I wasn't ready for. I knew I had to talk to my dad soon, but I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what he had to say. Update 3. After my dad's message, I didn't waste any time. The weight of his words, its urgent gnawed at me. It wasn't like him to throw around words like that unless something serious was going on. I called him back that night, and we arranged to meet the next morning. When I got to his place, I could feel the tension as soon as I walked in. He was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of him that looked untouched. The usual easy atmosphere between us was gone, replaced with something much heavier. I knew this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. I sat down across from him, waiting. He didn't waste any time getting to the point. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago," he began. His voice was low, almost strained, like it was hard for him to get the words out. "About your mom, and why she left." I didn't interrupt. I just sat there listening. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where everything would finally start to make sense. But as he continued, it became clear that what he was about to tell me wasn't something I could have ever prepared for. He told me that my mother had been having an affair. Someone from our community, a man I vaguely remembered from years ago, though the details were fuzzy. Apparently the affair had been going on for months, maybe longer, before it all came to a head. My dad found out, and the fallout was intense. She didn't leave because of a breakdown or the pressure of family life, like she had tried to tell me at the cafe. She left because the affair was about to be exposed, and she couldn't handle the shame. She chose to run instead of facing the consequences. The man she had been involved with was married too, and there were whispers starting to spread around the neighborhood. It was only a matter of time before everything blew up. So she packed her bags and disappeared, leaving me and my dad to pick up the pieces. My dad found out shortly before she left. He never told me because he thought it would hurt me more than help. At the time, I guess he thought it was best to protect me from the ugly truth. He thought it would be easier to let me believe she just needed space, that there was some reason outside of my control that she was gone. But now, as I sat across from him, listening to the real story for the first time, I wasn't sure how I felt about that choice. My mind was spinning. Everything I had believed about why my mom left was built on a lie. I had spent the last decade thinking she had her reasons, ones I would never fully understand. I had imagined her struggling with some personal demons, maybe feeling overwhelmed by life. But now I knew the truth, and it wasn't anything like I thought it would be. She had walked away because she couldn't face the mess she had made. There was a long silence after my dad finished talking. He looked tired, worn down by the weight of the secret he had been carrying for so long. I couldn't blame him. In a weird way, I understood why he had kept it from me. He had done what he thought was best, and I couldn't fault him for that. But now I had to figure out what to do with this new information. I left his house that morning feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. The reunion with my mom had already left me with questions, but now, with the truth out in the open, everything felt even more complicated. The version of my mom I had in my head, the one who had left because of some vague personal crisis, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't know at all. I couldn't shake the thought that she had lied to me again, even in that cafe. She had told me a half-truth, conveniently leaving out the part where she had been unfaithful. Did she really think I wouldn't find out? Or did she just hope that I wouldn't dig deeper? As I drove back home, I thought about whether I should confront her. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to sit her down and demand the truth. I wanted her to admit what she had done, to stop hiding behind excuses. But another part of me wondered if it was even worth it. Would she come clean? Or would she keep spinning the same web of half-truths and vague explanations? I wasn't sure if I had the energy to find out. I talked to Anne about it that night. She listened, like she always did, without jumping in right away. When I finished, she didn't try to tell me what to do, but she did make one thing clear. I had to make the decision for myself. No one could tell me whether to confront my mom or to walk away. It was something I had to figure out on my own. The wedding was fast approaching. and I knew I didn't have a lot of time to decide. My mom had asked to come to the wedding, but now, knowing what I knew, I wasn't sure if I could allow that. How could I let her sit there pretending to be a part of my life again when she hadn't even been honest with me about why she left? I was torn between the part of me that wanted closure and the part of me that wanted to protect myself from more lies. After a few days of thinking it over, I made a decision. I had to talk to her again. I needed to hear her side of the story, this time the full story. No more half-truths, no more vague explanations. I needed to know if she was capable of owning up to her mistakes, or if she would keep running from them. So I sent her a message. It was short, like the one before. Another meeting. Another chance for her to tell the truth. Now, all I had to do was wait and see if she would. Update 4. The second meeting with my mom was set at the same cafe, but this time the energy was different. I wasn't going in blind like before. I had learned the truth from my dad, and now it was time to confront her about it. This wasn't just about a conversation, it was about facing the past head-on. I arrived a little early, my mind racing through everything that had been said and everything that still needed to be addressed. When she walked in, she seemed more nervous than the last time. I could see it in the way her eyes darted around the room before settling on me. She walked over, but this time I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Once we were seated, I didn't waste any time. I told her I knew about the affair, about why she really left. Her reaction was instant, shock flashed across her face, followed by a mix of fear and guilt. She hadn't expected this, that much was clear. For a moment, it seemed like she might deny it, but instead, she looked down, her hands fidgeting in her lap again. She started talking, this time not with the same vague explanations, but with something that sounded more like the truth. She told me she had been trapped in an unhappy marriage, that things between her and my dad had been strained for a long time. She described feeling suffocated by the life she had built, by the expectations of being a wife and mother, and then the affair happened. It wasn't planned, she said. It just happened. One thing led to another, and suddenly she found herself in a situation she didn't know how to control. She tried to explain that it wasn't just about the affair. It was about feeling like she couldn't fix anything anymore, like her life was spiraling out of control. She said she knew what she did was wrong, but she didn't know how to face it. And when the rumors started spreading, when the pressure of the affair began to close in, she made a choice. She ran. She thought leaving was the only option left. As she spoke, all I could think about was the years of lies. The years I spent wondering what had gone wrong, believing she had left because of some internal struggle, when the truth was so much more complicated. I listened to her try to justify her actions, but the more she talked, the more frustrated I became. It wasn't just the affair that hurt, it was everything that came after. The silence, the abandonment, the way she had let me believe something else for so long. Eventually, she stopped talking, her voice trailing off as she looked at me, waiting for my response. But I didn't know what to say. The anger I had been holding onto for years bubbled to the surface, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her how much her lies had hurt me, how her decision to leave had torn our family apart. I told her about the years I spent wondering why she didn't come back, wondering if I had done something wrong. And now, to find out that it had all been because of an affair. It was like a punch to the gut. She listened, her expression crumbling as I spoke. By the time I finished, she was in tears. She admitted that she had been too scared to face the consequences of her actions. She said she hadn't known how to fix things, so she chose the easy way out. She apologized again and again, saying she regretted it all. But the apology didn't change the facts. It didn't erase the years of pain she had caused. I sat there for a while after she finished, letting the weight of everything sink in. She had finally told me the truth, but the truth didn't bring the closure I had been hoping for. Instead, it just left me feeling even more conflicted. Part of me understood that she had been going through something difficult, but another part of me couldn't get past the fact that she had chosen to run away from it all, leaving us to deal with the aftermath. She asked me again if she could come to the wedding. Her voice was soft, almost pleading, as if this was her way of trying to make amends. But I didn't have an answer for her. How could I let her be part of one of the most important days of my life after everything she had done? How could I trust that she wouldn't just disappear again, leaving more damage in her wake? I told her I needed time to think. She nodded, wiping away the last of her tears, and we both stood up to leave. The tension between us was still there, heavy and unresolved. This wasn't the clean break I had been hoping for. It wasn't the neat ending where everything made sense and we all moved on. Instead, I was left with more questions, more uncertainty. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt the pressure building. The wedding was fast approaching, and I still didn't know what to do. My mind raced through the possibilities. If I let her come, would it ruin the day? Would I regret not letting her be there, trying to rebuild some kind of relationship? Or would I be opening the door to more pain, more disappointment? A few days later, I received a letter from her. It was handwritten, something that felt oddly personal in a way that an email or text couldn't. In the letter, she apologized again, but this time it felt different. She wasn't just apologizing for leaving. She was apologizing for everything. For the affair, for the lies, for the years of silence. She wrote that she knew she didn't deserve my forgiveness, but she hoped that, one day, I might give her another chance. Not just to come to the wedding, but to be part of my life again. Reading the letter, I felt the weight of her words. This was her final plea, her last attempt to make things right. But as much as I wanted to believe her, to hope that she had changed, I still wasn't sure if I could let her back in. The wedding was only a week away, and I knew I couldn't put off the decision any longer. I had to choose whether to open the door to my past or close it for good. Update 5. The letter from my mother sat on my desk for days. I read it once, twice, then again, trying to make sense of it. This time, her words seemed different, more honest. She took full responsibility, admitting to everything. her affair, her decision to leave, and the lies she had told to protect herself. She didn't try to justify her actions or make excuses. She owned it, fully and completely. And for the first time, she wrote that she knew she didn't deserve forgiveness. But she hoped, whether I allowed her at the wedding or not, that we could try to rebuild a relationship someday. Her letter was heavy, like a final attempt to reach out. It wasn't begging or pleading. It was just there, simple and direct. She wanted to come to the wedding, but if I said no, she'd accept it. She wrote that she understood this was my day, and she didn't want to take that away from me. After reading it, I felt the weight of everything settling over me. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about my future, whether I was ready to open that door to her again or whether I would close it for good. I didn't make my decision right away. I sat with the letter for a while, letting the words sink in. I talked it over with Anna one last time. We were sitting in the living room, wedding plans scattered across the coffee table. She had been with me through everything, patient, steady, never pressuring me to decide one way or the other. When I told her about the letter, she listened quietly, nodding as I explained my thoughts. She didn't tell me what to do, but her support was clear. She wanted me to make the decision that I could live with, no matter what it was. I also spoke with my dad. He wasn't surprised when I told him about the letter, and like Anna, he didn't try to sway me in either direction. He just reminded me that whatever decision I made, it had to be for me, not for her, not for anyone else. You've carried this for a long time, he told me. You deserve to move forward in a way that makes sense for you. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of last-minute details, family arriving, and moments of quiet reflection. I thought a lot about what my mother's presence would mean. If she came, it wouldn't just be about her sitting in the back row. It would be about acknowledging that she was part of my life again, even after everything she had done. It would mean that I was ready to start over, to see if we could rebuild something from the ashes of the past. But if she wasn't there, it would be a clear statement that I wasn't ready, that maybe I would never be ready to let her back in. The wedding day arrived, and the morning was a mix of excitement and nerves. I didn't think about my mother much as I got dressed, as I stood with my best man, or even as I waited for the ceremony to begin. I was focused on Anna, on the life we were about to start together. The sun was shining, the guests were gathering, and everything felt right. The ceremony was set in a beautiful outdoor space, with chairs lined up under a canopy of trees. Family and close friends filled the rows, and I saw familiar faces smiling back at me as I stood at the front. My dad was there, his suit pressed and his face calm, his pride for me evident. Anna's family sat together, her mother wiping away happy tears before the ceremony had even started. As I stood there, waiting for Anna to walk down the aisle, I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been looking forward to for so long. But just before the music started, I glanced toward the back of the rows. For a second, my heart skipped, wondering if she would be there. I had made my decision, but still, the moment carried weight. The ceremony unfolded like a dream. Anna walked down the aisle, stunning and radiant, her smile lighting up the whole space. We exchanged vows, our words filled with love and promises for the future. Everything felt surreal, like I was floating through the best day of my life. My friends and family watched with smiles and tears, the happiness in the air almost tangible. And then it was over. We were married. The crowd erupted into cheers as we turned to walk back down the aisle, hand in hand, officially husband and wife. My heart was full, my mind clear. As we walked past the rows of guests, my eyes drifted one last time to the back. And there, quietly sitting in the last row, was my mother. She didn't make a scene. She didn't come up to me or try to get my attention. She just sat there watching as the moment unfolded. Her face was calm, a little sad, but also grateful. She had come, as I had allowed her, but she had respected the distance. She had been part of the day, but not in a way that overshadowed it. As I passed by, I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge her directly. But I knew, in that moment, that the decision I made was the right one. I had allowed her to be there, but the boundaries were still clear. This was my day with Anna, my day to move forward, and my mother's presence didn't change that. After the ceremony, the reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and celebration. My mother didn't stay long, and I didn't expect her to. She left quietly, slipping away before the night's end. But her being there, it felt like a step. Maybe not a full reconciliation, but a step towards something different. The wedding day had been perfect, despite everything. And as I looked around at the people I loved, I knew that the future was bright. Whatever happened with my mother, whether we rebuilt that relationship or not, I knew one thing for sure. I had made peace with the past, and I was ready to move forward. The rest, I would figure out in time.